Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Quit Quite Quiet. Hello everyone, and right off the bat, the eagle-eared listeners among you. Is that a term? Eagle-eared? I'm sure that's good. They got good eyes. They must have good ears. The eagle-eared listeners among you will notice a couple of things right off the bat and throughout this episode. One, audio is maybe slightly wonky. And two, the only voice you're hearing is mine. And that's because we have arrived at the time of year where we tend to have more solo episodes, I think, than at other times of year. Things just happen. Things tended to happen at this time of year, even when we weren't in the middle of a global panorama or panini or whatever. And even more so now. But rather than miss an episode like we did last time, which I hate doing, but everyone was very patient with us about, I decided, let's just hammer one out. I'll just chat with you guys, and then we'll get back to regular business next time around, which we will in fact do. One piece of business before we get into this week's episode. Actually, two pieces of business. One, we're always on the lookout for listener suggestions for words. We've done a couple of these listener wordstravaganza episodes, and they come in handy in times like this because we could review back and look at your questions and maybe make this whole podcasting business a little more interactive. I put out a call on Twitter and on Facebook, but asking you directly now if you guys have any, questions that have come up, those things that Amy and I sometimes talk about where it's a thing that we've always kind of wondered, but not wondered enough to want to put any work into. That's what we want. So pass along, get in touch with us on Twitter at Lexitecture. We're on Instagram officially, although I neglect that account, something fierce, but we are there. On Instagram, we are Lexitecture Podcast, and you can find us at Lexitecture on Facebook as well, or you can email words@lexitecture.com. So send in your suggestions, words, maybe even phrases. We get those sometimes, or just kind of etymological questions, and we are going to develop a whole bank of these things, and we'll just hammer away at them, and hopefully we'll get around to your suggestion, burning etymological question at some point, but yes, please do send them in. Now, to make up for the fact that you have to listen to just me, I decided to do something slightly different, and I'm going to take a run at 3 words that are very similar to look at, are almost never thought of as being similar, at least I've never thought of them as being similar, but have incredibly similar, nay, even a singular origin. And those 3 words are quit, quite, and quiet, which are also a lot of fun to say all in a row like that. So when we look at quit, quite, and quiet, common use now, quite is interesting because actually a lot of these are sort of interesting in their own rights because they have a couple different meanings. Quiet is relatively straightforward. Quiet, absence of noise, lack of hubbub or hullabaloo, if you will, and you will. But that one aside, a word like quite, adjective, adverb, however you want to describe it, if something can be quite enough, meaning fully enough, or, maybe not quite is sort of the same meaning. So, generally means sufficient or enough or entirely, but I feel like sometimes, and this is one of those times when I'd be relying on my friend and cohort to back me up or say, no, you're being dumb. I feel like it's kind of like a word like enough, where it is kind of hyperbolic, but also understated sometimes. Anyway, quite. I think it's got a variety of uses, although I'm blanking on what those uses are right now. You ever have those moments? Yeah, you do. And quit, you think of it as, basically I quit, to be done with something, to leave a situation. I feel like the verb is definitely more common now, but originally it was both adjective and verb, and that's kind of where we start. We start with quit, the adjective. Earliest citation in the OED is around 1225, so quite early, not quite Old English. It is a borrowing from French, so it's got the Anglo-Norman influence. Its original use as an adjective was exempt or released from an obligation or a debt, or etc. So free and clear, basically. Quit and free. To be quit for is to get off with, suffer nothing more than. There's another sort of phrase here in the OED, to pass quit, to escape unharmed, to go unchecked or unpunished. I mean, it says this is now rare, which I think is true, but you see a little bit of it in the legal term acquitted. It's in to be free and rid of an offense, to be acquitted of your alleged crimes. You're not found guilty, you are acquitted. You're now free of that thing. So that might be where the best sort of road into getting what these original meanings were of quit. And then you have the verb to quit, which in its earliest sense is interesting as well. It's to pay a debt or to repay. So if you have a debt, to quit that debt was to pay it off, which of course then means you are free of it. You're unencumbered by it. You have gotten rid of it. You're done. You're free. You're away. You've quit. And of course, now you think, I think, you can't fire me, I quit. When you quit a job, you quit a task, you quit something, you're free of that thing as well, and away you go. There's a couple other kind of interesting obsolete ones to be. There's one in the 1375, it shows up in Geoffrey Chaucer, and it's to be equal to. To quit the cost is to be equal to the cost. But again, you have that sense of a cost, and then you're balancing that and redressing it so that you are free from it. There's no debt attached to it, that type of thing. So there's a lot of that being free from in quit. Now we're going to shift over to quiet, because quiet also has that sense where you're freedom from, right? There's a lack of something. Quiet is not a thing in itself. It's a lack. It's an absence. It's a lack of other things. A lack of annoying other things generally, but a lack of interrupting or noise-making things. That's quiet. It's an absence. It's a freedom. Now, quite ties into this as well, because quite, if we talked about, I muddled it up at the beginning, but as an intensifier, if you're saying that's quite right, the quite is there to give a sense of wholeness and completion and completeness to the thing that follows it. That's quite nice. That's quite beautiful. You're quite right about that. It's an intensifier. It is meant to represent that it is whole, which you can see in that to quit a debt. There's nothing excess, nothing left over. And also in something that is quiet is on its own and is whole, and there's nothing else kind of impinging on it, infringing on it. This feels artificial, I think, because those three things, it might seem like I'm trying to cram them all, a square, circle, and triangle peg into an octagonal hole here. But there's a reason for that, and it's actually because they are all related. They're all cognate with each other. So quite as an adverb doesn't show up until the 1300s in the OED, and it actually is sort of an adverbial form of quit, free and clear. Quiet is also in sort of circa 1300, but all three of these things come from a PIE root that is spelled out in English letters, or the Latin alphabet, K-W-E-I-E, quay or something. And that is a Proto-Indo-European root meaning to rest or be quiet. So at rest, at ease, at leisure, forms all are part of acquiesce, acquit, coy, quiet, quit, quite. And requiem is another kind of cool one, and quietude. But yeah, so that's where ultimately, and obviously you see that qu sound, which became the QUI through the Latin branch of the family tree, and we get the words quit, quite, and quiet, which I thought was interesting. Because, like I said earlier, I would never have put those three together, but kind of makes sense, and I kind of like it that it's, yeah, I like that they're tied together. I like that it, because it feels like something that could be folk etymologizing. Why can I never say that word? Etymologizing. This is what I get for verbing nouns that probably maybe shouldn't be verbed. Anyway, etymologizing. That sounds right. Okay, I'm going to go with that. It sounds like folk etymologizing, but it actually is just regular etymology. So it all goes back to pi, which we love, of course, and the word for rest and quiet. And I figure because I have time and because I like it and because we haven't broken open Smith's synonyms discriminated recently, I thought I'd have a look and see what of these three words were in there. And he's got 3 entries in his synonyms discriminated. He's got quit shows up once and quiet has 2 different entries. So quit appears as a synonym for leave. And he says, we leave that to which we may return, but we quit that to which we purpose not to return. So he's interpreting quit there as having a sense of finality that's not there when you just leave somewhere. I don't know that it's maintained that. I think you can, I mean, when you quit a job, there's definitely a sense of finality, and I guess you don't really use it very often in other senses. But if you were to quit a room, you'd probably sound more like you were just being overly formal rather than I'm never coming back. But at least in Smith's time, that was a discrimination that he chose to make. Where quiet shows up is under the entry for calm, and it's in with still, quiet, serene, tranquil, peaceful, placid, settled, composed, and collected. So Smith was apparently a dude who appreciated stillness and serenity and calm, because there's a lot of these in here. When he looks at quiet, it's, again, he's got a sense of that sort of wholeness or finality to it. He says, quote, quiet denotes rather an habitual than a passing state, yet according to the present usage, it is more applicable generally to the external circumstances of life than to temper or manners. When employed of these, it would rather imply a silent or retiring disposition. I long to lead a quiet life would mean a life of retirement from the busy occupations and cares of life. A quiet mind is an unharassed mind, yet quiet does not of necessity involve happiness, for there is a quiet of compulsion, of a swoon, of death. A quiet mind is rather a qualification for a virtuous life than a virtue in itself. And so there's an interesting bit of 19th century moralizing about, well, stuff, but a quiet mind is rather a qualification for a virtuous life than a virtue in itself. So I'm not sure that I have a quiet mind most of the time. I certainly don't have a quiet life most of the time, but maybe that means I'm barred of virtue, but who knows? At least I'm not lacking of virtue in itself. The other place that quiet shows up is under the entry for ease. So it's there with quiet, rest, and repose under ease. And he says, quiet denotes the absence of a disturbing cause, as, e.g., harassing thoughts or noises, and is inapplicable to the bodies of men. I don't really know what to do with that. I guess he's establishing quiet as a, I don't know if this is more 1800s being very philosophical about whether humans can actually ever be quiet in this kind of Platonic ideal sense, or if it's the bodies of men is an interesting turn of phrase there. So I'm assuming he means of men as in like the species-wide application of men to mean humans, but maybe not. Maybe there's also a weird 1800s, 19th century moralizing and also genderizing thing going on where men are particularly set against the concept of quiet. I don't know, but it's interesting anyway, or at least I thought it was. Hopefully you also thought it was, because that's the end. A nice little quick one. We did quick in another episode, so in case you're thinking that, not the same, but you can also check back on that one. But yeah, there's quit, quite, and quiet, all different ways to be whole, unencumbered, free, clear, not needing anything else, and not harassed by anything else. So there you have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your patience with these occasional flubs in scheduling. Transatlantic recording sessions are not the easiest, but we do try. And hopefully these kind of will tide you over until we can get back to a proper schedule. But to circle back, please do send us your listener suggestions. I'm not going to promise up and down because that would be stupid. But I could say, hopefully we don't have to do this again, but we will. At some point it'll come up, and if we can chat to you about the stuff you specifically and actively want to hang out and talk about, or listen to us talk about, I guess, then yeah, we'd like to do that. So hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, by email, at our website, lexitecture.com. Anywhere you can find us, drop us a line and give us those etymology questions, and we'll add them to the mailbag. And until next time, thank you again for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye. And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at Lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.